Hi everyone, it's Yvette Le Blowitz from SpiritGirl.com and welcome to the Spirit Girl Talk Show podcast. I'm super excited to be here with you today and with our very special guest, Brad Aronson, who is the author of HumanKind, Changing the World One Small Act at a Time. It's a national bestseller. Deepak Chopra is officially giving it a raving review, which is it's an elegant, wise book of love in action. Brad Aronson, welcome to the show. How are you?
Yvette, I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on the show. How are you today?
Really well. It's so great you're joining us, and welcome to our global Spirit Girl audience. I'm super excited to have you here. This is a great honor. I'm so grateful because, as you know, before I hit the record button, I had to give you download that I really loved listening to your book on Audible. It was incredible, all of the stories you included and also your own journey. But before we dive into your book, are you happy to let our listeners know a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So I am a husband, I'm a dad, we have a 12-year-old. My 12-year-old is very creative and loves to run around. So it's been a little challenging with the lockdowns. So we've invented a bunch of indoor sports and we haven't broken too much stuff, but had lots of fun. I teach entrepreneurship to 18 to 25-year-old people in Camden, New Jersey. And I also obviously write and I invest in startup companies and just try to have as much fun as I can. So trying to make every moment count, which can be really difficult when you're locked up, but that's my goal.
I love that. And what inspired you to write the book HumanKind?
I had a couple inspirations for the book. One of those inspirations was I attended the graduation of a mentee of mine. It was her high school graduation, and she was graduating from Girard College. And even though it's called Girard College, it is actually a high school in the United States. And at this graduation, on my left side was a 70-something-year-old man. And he told me he came down from New York for graduation and that he comes every single year. And this is a 2-hour trip for him, but Girard changed his life. So he wants to be there for every single graduating class to support them. And there's a part in the ceremony where you sing the school song. This guy stood up and he was belting it out so proudly. And on my other side was this woman. She was crying. She said, I thought my daughter might be dead or in jail, and here she is graduating. You're in this incredible environment. The commencement speaker gets up, and it's Mark Morial, who is a civil rights leader in the United States. And he talks about how this is defying the odds. The students at Girard College are from areas of Philadelphia where it's expected many of them will drop out of high school. Very few of them will go on to college. Yet every single graduating senior had been accepted to college. And he went on to say, you're not going to see this in the news tomorrow because the news often misses the most important stories, the good news, and you're not going to see it. And it's unfortunate, but these young people are inheriting a world of negativity. So of course, the next day I wake up, I get online, I can't find anything about Girard anywhere. I go out, I actually buy the print newspaper. It's the Philadelphia Inquirer, our local paper. Nothing's in there. And it was just so disappointing. I felt like I had been an extra in an inspirational movie. I got to watch this and everyone would be lifted up by seeing it and knowing about it. And it was nowhere to be found. And I decided that if I wanted to see more good news stories out there, I should start writing them. So I started blogging about it. Then 6 months later, my wife, Mia, she had noticed a swollen lymph node and went to the doctor. And after testing, the doctor said, you have leukemia. You need to go to the hospital immediately. If you're lucky, you'll get out of the hospital in 30 days, and then you'll have 2.5 years of outpatient chemotherapy, which basically meant we would go back to the hospital 3 to 5 days a week for chemotherapy. And we'd be there for hours at a time. And just to let you know, she has gotten through treatment. She's gotten a clean bill of health, and we feel very lucky. Of course, we didn't know this at the time. So she does her month of inpatient chemo, and thank heavens it goes well. So she gets out of the hospital and she's doing her outpatient chemo. And during this process, the nurses say, you should really go to this conference for young cancer patients and their caregivers. And we said, we're in the hospital almost every day. I don't think we want to go to a conference about cancer on the weekends. And they said, you should really go. And we thought, like, the nurses were a critical part of our treatment. I don't think we would have made it without them. Most people, if you've had a health emergency, the nurses get you through it. And we decided if they think we should do it, we should do it. So we went to this conference, and there was a speaker who had been through the same treatment as Mia. And she said, if you have 2.5 years of treatment ahead of you, you need a project. A project gives you a purpose, a distraction, and something to do during the thousands of hours that you're going to be in the hospital. So that night at home, we're talking about projects. Our son, Jack, is 5 at the time. And he doesn't know exactly what's going on, but he hears about projects. So he declares that his project is going to be playing 200 days of wiffle ball in a row. He loves baseball. He loves our local team, the Phillies. So he's wearing his Phillies hat. He's got a Phillies necklace, wristbands, a jersey, shorts, socks, everything. And we played 200 days in a row. And you might not know, but the Phillies tend to lose a lot of baseball games. That season, they won 200 straight and had their best season ever.
That's incredible.
It was fun. It was fun. We played, like, kids know how to have fun. So we played wiffle ball 200 days in a row. My wife's project was she wanted to write in her journal a little bit every day or draw a picture. And my project, I decided I'd write about the small acts of kindness that changed our lives during that time. And it was, for me, I was someone who was a volunteer. I'd always been helping people. And I was really bad at accepting help. People would say, tell me what I could do. It's just like I got frozen. I don't know. And then people just started doing things. And it changed our life. My wife's friend Dawn called and said, I know that Jack loves Little League baseball. Sign up for the Little League baseball season. I'm going to sign Jack up and get him on a team with a friend so that he can get a ride to all the practices because you're at the hospital so much. We live in a giant city where the Little League has too few volunteers and an extremely reasonable policy that you cannot, under any circumstances, ask to be on someone's team. Dawn made it work, and we had a family that could drive Jack. And we didn't have to explain to them, hey, we're in this situation. It was easy. My brother and his wife did all this research, talked to cancer patients, found everything you might need if you're going to be staying in the hospital for chemotherapy. And they dropped it all off at our house and said, use what you want, donate the rest. And there was all these acts of people just going out and doing things. And it changed our lives. So I wrote those stories, and it made an interesting shift in my mind because at first, when we were meeting with all these doctors, we kept hearing, this is really unusual. Mia's in such good shape. She's really young. Like, it's unusual she has this type of cancer, which only amplifies what's already going on in my head. Like, why us? Why does my son have to, not have his mom around for 2.5 years? Why does my wife, who's so kind, have to suffer? And when I wrote down all these kind acts, I started seeing that we were lucky, and I started feeling grateful. And it changed that dialogue in my head. I mean, I would have switched places in a second if I could have, but we couldn't. And I still didn't feel good about where we were, but it helped me become more positive. It helped me get through that. And then after that, I started writing about other people's stories where a small act of kindness changed their life and then had this ripple effect, often changing thousands of lives. So that's kind of how the book came to be.
First of all, I'm so happy that Mia has recovered. That's incredible in itself because we know some people sadly get very, very ill and things don't go so well for them. So it's just so lovely to hear that Mia is better and that you got through the hardest days of your life through the acts of kindness or through people just showing up. You didn't even have to go and ask people for help. They were all coming to you, which I was really blown away with the acts of kindness that your family and friends did during your journey, because that must have been incredibly hard to get that news. Like, your whole life changed in that moment, didn't it?
Absolutely. You go from planning your future and thinking about what you're going to do and worrying about things that wind up not even making a difference when you get news like that. And suddenly everything shifts and it's like, holy cow, we don't know what's going to happen. and your world's just turned upside down. It's stressful and difficult. Also, it creates some perspective. In hindsight, it creates perspective. At the time, you're just trying to get through it.
And there was a story that you shared, and it was about Jack going off to a school camp. Can you share more about that story? Because that really stood out, that act of kindness that was carried out there.
Yes. I mean, that story, I've told it a lot of times and I tear up every time. So Mia was in the hospital over the holidays. And during that time period, Jack was going to be out of school for 2 weeks. And when he was busy, he's at school, he's running around. It's easier for him not to think about what's going on. That his mom, who was an incredible mom and super engaged, is just not around that much and is in the hospital. But if he's home for 2 weeks, it's going to be difficult. And how am I supposed to visit her in the hospital? Because I can't bring him to see her, because if he saw the other patients in the area, it would just probably get him very nervous. We would visit when we could, and it was orchestrated. So Mia would put her wig on, we'd meet in the lobby, and she'd get all her strength to be like uppity, and and it was great for her to see him and great for him to see her. But we were nervous, like, what are we going to do over those 2 weeks? And my cousin Betsy says, I found something. I found a camp that over break kids can go to while their parents are doing other things. They're at work. And I said, great. So I signed Jack up for camp. And unfortunately, there's a law about the ratio of staff to campers. And we had signed up too late, so Jack couldn't get in. And my cousin Betsy found out. She said, don't worry, he's going to get in. And she called me back. And all these moms who I did not know, donated their days at camp so that Jack could go. And many of these were working moms. So they were going to have to take days off from work to take care of their kids. But instead, they reached out to some stranger to help. And it blew me away. And the end of the story, which was great, is some random kid wound up dropping out. So we got to go, and none of those moms had to lose their days. But it was just such a generous act from people I had never met before in my life.
That was such a touching story. Thank you for sharing that with us. Because when I listened to that, I was like, wow. Like you said, these women have commitments and work, but it was so incredible. There was a gentleman who just offered, what can I do for you? I will pick up Jack. The outpouring of help was incredible. And just the thoughtfulness, obviously for someone now who's got a loved one, maybe going through cancer treatment or any kind of illness or any kind of difficulty, often we want to wait for that person to ask us for help. What your book reminded me of is, don't wait for someone to ask you for help. Just offer your help. Think about ways, like whether it be mowing the lawn or bringing them groceries or cooking them a meal or picking them up. Think of ways where you can just offer the help. Because like you, many of us might be wanting to help others, but it's very hard for us to receive help or ask for help as carers.
Yes, I heard that when I was telling other people's stories and I talked to those people. They said exactly what you just said, that it's so hard to accept help. And on the flip side, when we want to help someone, sometimes we think it's awkward. Maybe they don't want to talk about it. Maybe I'm intruding. What I heard across the board is that it meant the world to people when someone did something. And it could be as small as sending a card. I am thinking of you. You know, when Mia was going through treatment, we got a card and it said, "Dear Mia, I'm the mom of one of Jack's classmates, and I just want to let you know you have another mom in your corner." That brought both of us to tears. And if I had seen that letter before we went through this, I would have said, oh, that's nice. But having gone through that, when you're in a very difficult emotional spot, the smallest actions make the biggest difference. And I would just say, you know, love is a verb. It's about doing, and we should just pick something out and do it. Send a note, drop something off. Hey, I'm going to the supermarket. What can I get you? I made chicken soup and I made a whole lot of extra. Can I drop it off? You know, finding a way to just show people that you're there.
I love that. And there was in your book, you talked about the You Matter card. Are you able to share that story with us?
This story is about my friend Cheryl. So she was working at a very stressful job and was just at her wit's end and thought she might have a breakdown. And someone gave her a card and it had two words on it. It said, "You matter." And it just changed everything. She said to me, someone saw me. They could see that I was struggling. They gave me that card. And it had such a profound impact on her that she decided she wanted to start giving You Matter cards away. She created these cards and would give them out to people. And it had a huge impact. So then she said anyone who wants could sign up on her website and she will send them 30 You Matter cards. You just have to commit that you're going to give them away. And the stories are unbelievable about, a woman and her son who had just were not connected and they had such a hard time. And the mom just gave him this card and he said, "Thank you." And that was the opening for them. He's a friend of mine. So I see all these stories that come in about the impact that those two words had. And I think it was this year, they gave out 1 million You Matter cards. And it was, someone gave her a card, she was inspired, and now she started this whole movement. What she says is it's hard for us to acknowledge other people. And this is almost like training wheels on a bike. It gives you a reason to talk to someone and say they matter, and then you become comfortable. You don't need the cards anymore, but it's a great way to get started. It's great to do with your kids, but she took something that changed her life and has now changed many, many other lives.
I love, love, love that story. And that was so touching and incredible how she was able to take that You Matter card and now share it with the world. That was so incredible. Can you share some stories around the poverty, people going hungry? For many of us who have got a full belly every day and abundance of food, we really haven't experienced that, but you've now done some research. Can you share more about that, Brad, with us?
In the United States, hunger is a huge problem. I think the stats are that 1 in 5 people suffers from not having enough food. One of the stories is about Wilson Good. So Wilson is a friend of mine, and when he was a kid, he was in poverty, and he had many siblings, and his dad was in jail. There was barely enough food, and someone knocked on the door and said, "I'm hungry." And his mom brought them to the dinner table and fed them. And Wilson said, "At first, I was furious. I was like, we don't have enough food, and she's feeding this stranger." And by the end of dinner, he realized that this was just another person and that it was their responsibility to help them. And years later, he became the managing director of Philadelphia, which is kind of like you're under the mayor and running the business of the city.
Wow.
And someone came to his office and said, "Wilson, if you look at the park, there's about 20 homeless men there. What should we do?" And he told me, he just flashed back instantly to that dinner. And without asking the mayor or asking anyone, he called the fire department, found a fire department with a basement, set up cots, and brought those men there as a shelter to feed them and give them a place to rest. And that was the first homeless nonprofit in Philadelphia. He set up the first homeless shelter. And again, who would have known that that one dinner when he was 13 years old is what led him to create that?
That was such a powerful, moving story. And that one dinner has now changed many people's lives. It's incredible, isn't it? And as a child, if we are exposed to random acts of kindness, it too inspires us to continue that legacy. Both my mum and my dad were very big on acts of kindness, and it really does stick with you. If you can see the person in the gutter, homeless, an act of kindness is even having compassion and empathy and looking at someone else with love.
Absolutely. And having talked and known many homeless people in Philadelphia, what I've heard is the hardest thing is that all these people just turn away and ignore them. So not being acknowledged as a person And they said, just when someone looks at me and says hello, it helps me feel better. Like, there are people who have had really difficult circumstances. No one wants to be homeless. And acknowledging them, or even bringing some extra food with you or a pair of socks to give to them, is a way to show compassion and be helpful.
Brad, another story I absolutely loved was the coffee run. Can you share that? That was just so powerful, that story also.
I love that you love so many stories. Thank you.
I love them all. Actually, I could go through the whole book, and I'm thinking, oh, we'd be having like a marathon podcast show. But no, I love the stories. It's just so empowering, because these are everyday people like you or I. And it's such a reminder we all have the power to change the world one small act at a time. And sometimes we might feel powerless, but we have so much power, human connection and human possibility, that, yeah, I love this story. So we'll share this story, because I reckon this is going to inspire a lot of people today who are tuning into the podcast show.
This story is about this guy, Dan, and Dan's father had cancer, and it was a recurrence. So he had cancer, gotten better, was in remission, then had it again. And when Dan took his dad back to the cancer center, he noticed that so many of the same patients were there. And he just felt so sad for them. It was a sad place. Obviously, everyone there is fighting for their lives. And he decided he wanted to do something. So he stood up and said, hey, does anyone want me to get them coffee? He said, I had my dad's wallet, but everyone there valued my dad's money more than me, because only 3 people wanted coffee. And he went out and got coffee, and it became part of his routine. So his dad would go, I think, 4 days a week for chemotherapy, and he'd always bring coffee for anyone who wanted it. And then once his dad was finished with treatment, Dan decided he wanted to keep going. And he would just go and buy coffees. And eventually he's getting 20 coffees, then 30, then 40 at a time. And it had a huge impact. And there was so much serendipity in his story. So he was running out of money, and he didn't tell anyone this. He just, because he's using his money to buy all these coffees. And the baristas at Starbucks, where he would go, saw him all the time. And everyone would ask, like, why is that guy buying so much coffee? And they'd be like, oh, we want to help him. So one of the baristas called the news station. And when he got there, they said, you can't come in yet because the news station is setting up. And he said, what? And they recorded this and put it on the news. And Dan said the next day when he got to Starbucks, there was a line waiting for him. And there was this giant construction worker who gave him $20, and some guy with his kid who handed him money and said all these people gave him money. And it helped kind of the next month of paying for all these coffees. And then he expanded it to a second location. And he told me, like, one point at the hospital, some little girl came up to him with her mom, and she said, you know, for my birthday party, I had all my friends give me Starbucks gift cards so I can give this to you. And he's been bringing now over the years thousands and thousands of cups of coffee. And I saw, like, some of these patients, they said, this is what got me through the day. I'm there and I can't think of anything. And then someone gets me a coffee and it makes me smile. And Dan's like a good conversationalist also. He's telling jokes, making people happy. But he did it. And he told me, he said, this is what keeps me going. Like, I love this. I have a purpose. I'm useful. And it's making a difference. And he just became the coffee guy, Coffee Dan, who's making this delivery almost every day, these 2 cancer centers in the United States.
That story was so incredible. And I have to say, I was literally listening to your audio book, and I get to the Coffee Dan story part and talk about serendipity. I'm going to order my coffee, which is a latte on almond bonsai, and I go to give my card to pay for it. And the barista says, you don't have to pay for it. I'm like, what? Really? She said, oh, the lady in front, she said, give that free coffee to the girl behind me. And I was like, you kidding? I'm getting a free coffee? What? A free coffee? That lady just paid for my coffee? What? She's like, yeah, she gave you her free coffee. I was like, I can't believe this. This has never happened to me. And all of the time I've been going to this coffee shop, drive-through daily, unbelievable. And I was so blown away, like so touched, so blown. I think I was actually in shock at first. I'll be honest. I was a bit like, is this really happening? No way. No, that lady, she just gave me the coffee. So I'm like trying to get the attention of this lady. She could just like watch my face and it would have been priceless. And I finally get her attention because she's in this massive big Pajero truck just in front. And I'm like, thank you so much. Like trying to get her attention. I'm like, should I get out of the car and go up and thank her or what? She'll probably. So I'm waving like, thank you, thank you. And she's like, that's all right. So I was so blown away. I then go to the other barista who gives me the coffee. Oh my goodness, you're not going to believe what's happened. She goes, what? I said, the lady in front just gave me a free coffee. She's like, no way. We've never had that before. So I don't know, but I tell you what was so touching. I thought I just got to enjoy this moment, embrace it and really feel it. And as I drove off, I literally started tearing up. A tear came out because someone has never been that kind in my life. That one small act of kindness really, really, really just transformed my life. And I'm wondering, she's probably listening to your book, HumanKind, in audible form or maybe reading it, but talk about serendipity. It was so touching, moving to the point now where I want to do that when I get my free coffee, because we get like stamps. So I think it's 10 coffees and you get one free. I want to do that now where I want to give my free coffee to the person behind me and say, oh, no, just give them the free coffee, because knowing how powerful it is. And what the lady didn't realize is I've got my mum in aged care, and about a year ago during COVID, she had a seizure and went into a coma. And it was a very, very stressful time. Thankfully, she woke up and we're rehabilitating and things are going much better. But unfortunately, then we got hit with some more news that they found some malignant cancer. And sadly, because she's so frail, operating's not a possibility, and chemotherapy wouldn't be quite that good, and palliative care might be the only ending. So what that lady didn't know though, Brad, is I was going through all of that. So I feel that I really appreciated that free cup of coffee more than that woman will ever know. What are some other stories out of your book? Because you've written so many stories. They're all so touching. There's a Secret Santa story. There's where they're bringing these flowers into patients. What's another one that we can share with our audience?
It's hard because I love all the stories.
I know. It's hard to just condense it to a few for the podcast show.
I'll share the story about Jimmy is really touching to me. So Jimmy grew up in a town in Michigan called Flint, and he was in 3rd grade. And the only thing he wanted to do was not be noticed. It was really hard for him because, for one thing, when he went to school, his parents tied his shoelaces in a huge jumble of knots. And he was the only 3rd grader who had his shoes tied in a huge jumble of knots. But he was also the only 3rd grader who couldn't tie his shoes. And he would be even more horrified if he had to ask his teacher to tie his shoes. Every other 3rd grader could tie their shoes, but Jimmy had one major difference. Jimmy was missing a hand. And it was tough for him. So some of the kids would tease him and call him Captain Hook. He had a kid in his class cry on the first day because they thought his prosthetic hand was so scary looking. Things weren't easy. One day he gets to school and his teacher, Don Clarkson, is waiting outside of the classroom. And Mr. Clarkson says, Jimmy, I figured it out. And Jimmy says, what'd you figure out? He said, I'll show you. He turns on a movie for the rest of the class, brings 2 chairs into the hall, turns out the lights, shuts the door, and teaches Jimmy to tie his shoes with one hand. Decades later, Jim says, I don't know if it took him 20 minutes. I don't know if it took him hours. But the fact that he learned how to tie his shoes with one hand and taught me how to do it was a defining moment in my life. It made me realize that I could do what I wanted to do if I put the time and effort into it. And Jimmy loved baseball. So he practiced and he practiced. And he wound up leading the United States Olympic baseball team to a gold medal as our pitcher. Then he went to Cuba and played in an exhibition match. And because he had one hand, he would put his glove under his armpit, pitch, then put his glove back on to field it. The first 3 Cuban batters hit the ball to him on purpose, thinking it would be hard for him to field it. And the Cuban fans were wildly into the Cuban team. After the 3rd hit, they started booing the Cuban team, cheering for Jim Abbott, who got all 3 batters out. Jim went on to play professional baseball, as he wrote a wonderful book. And in his book, he says, people started coming to my games. So parents with their kids who had disabilities, to kind of show their kids a role model and to look for encouragement. And he started getting letters, and he got more and more letters. Eventually, Jim was getting hundreds of letters a week. And Jim said, I answered every single letter, along with someone at the ball club who helped me. I tried to meet with every single kid because I knew how much a little bit of encouragement could go. I know what Don Clarkson's encouragement did for me. One of those kids who met Jim Abbott was Nick Newell. When Nick was 6 years old, his grandparents took him to a Yankees game, and the Yankees were his favorite baseball team. And he got to do a meet and greet with Jim Abbott. And Nick told me, he said, that's the first time in my life I met anyone else who had only one hand. And here's this guy with one hand who pitched for my favorite baseball team and told me I could do whatever I wanted to do. And Nick wanted to be a wrestler. So in high school, he joined his high school wrestling team. He lost his first 17 matches by getting pinned. And if you're not a wrestler, getting pinned is the worst way to lose a wrestling match. You didn't just lose, you were destroyed. And he got progressively better. By senior year, he had state records, he had school records. He wound up captaining his college wrestling team. And then he started competing in mixed martial arts. And he lost his first match, but won his next 13. And he wanted to compete in the UFC, which is the best known and the highest paying mixed martial arts league. And Dana White, who was president, said, this place is so hard. It's hard enough to fight with 2 hands. I'd be crazy to let someone fight with 1 hand. So Nick joined a different league and became a world champion. And Nick told me, he said, people started showing up at his matches to ask for advice. How can I encourage my kid who's missing a limb? And then Nick started going to events where he would speak to kids who had lost all or part of an upper limb and encourage them. And I said, Nick, why do you do all this out in the community? And what do you say to them? And he said, when I was 6 years old, Jim Abbott took the time to talk to me. He taught me that he wasn't too important to talk to me, so I'm not too important to talk to anyone I could encourage. And what I tell them is that they can do whatever they want to do. And a lot of the time, I teach them how to tie their shoes with 1 hand.
Wow. That is so moving, that story, and so incredibly powerful. It just started with that one act of kindness, but also, as he talked about, he's never too busy to help someone and to encourage them. All of the time and effort he also now gives to help others is an act of kindness. He's not getting paid to sit there with some kid to encourage. He's honestly doing it because it's changed his life and he wants to encourage and change others. And I feel that we can all do that. People just want to be seen, heard, and encouraged. And if we can take anything away from his story, there are some really key fundamentals in humanity there. I want to talk about the Hall of Fame, because that really blew me away, how we can help people get eyesight. There were all of these small random acts of kindness, but were life-changing. Can you share more about that?
So the Hall of Fame is at the end of the book. And the purpose is to give anyone who feels inspired and wants to find ways to make a difference, a list of ways they can do it with other organizations. So one example is there's an organization, Himalayan Cataract Project, where basically if you donate $200, someone who is blind will be able to get cataract surgery and be able to see. There's a nonprofit where it's donors choose. And it's for schools where they can't afford the school supplies they need. And specific teachers put their needs up there. And you could donate as little as $1 towards a need, or you can fulfill an entire need and help those kids get what they need. And there's various nonprofits where you can send letters to hospitalized kids. And it's interesting because I think every one of them, and if not almost every one of them, was started by kids who were in a hospital and felt like a letter I received or a card made such a difference. I want other kids to get this. And you just send the organization a letter and they distribute it. There's just lots of opportunities like that where a little bit of time or a little bit of money can make a huge difference. As you're saying, it's also about looking around. We all know someone who could use a hand. We might notice someone who has a jumble of knots in their shoes and needs to learn how to tie their shoes, or someone who needs a note. And we can easily decide that every day we want to be a hero and we want to make a difference to someone and start kind of building that momentum.
I love that, Brad. Like, seriously, it's been so incredible talking to you. I could literally talk all day to you about your book and all of the stories and the lessons. And it is such a great reminder of how wonderful our world is, how truly incredible it is through one small act of kindness, and how we can, during our times as visitors on Mother Earth here, how we can make such a difference. And then when we make a difference to one person's life, that's going to make a difference to another person's life. And it's this ripple effect. And I feel that if anything during the global pandemic, more than ever, humankind changing the world one small act at a time is so needed. And let that be our anchor, and let that be our lighthouse, and let that be our purpose during these times. It's easy to get focused on all the negativity. I loved how now Philadelphia is capturing actually some great positive stories and putting it in the newspaper. That to me was incredible. So anyone who's a journalist out there, but there's your task for the week, to create more positive stories. Really, anyone who has a blog has the power to do this, or anyone who wants to start a blog and write about the small acts of kindness within their own community has the power, like you, Brad, to do it. I feel that you've now shown other people the opportunity to write and to get involved. Before we say goodbye, what was fascinating that all of your authors' royalties go to Big Brothers, Big Sisters. What is Big Brothers, Big Sisters? And why did you decide, with such a best-selling book, to actually do your own Changing the World One Small Act at a Time?
So Big Brothers, Big Sisters is a nonprofit that matches caring adults with kids who could use a mentor in their life, a caring adult. It shocks me how many children don't have a mentor. And all the research shows that if you have a mentor, you're so much more likely to have a productive life and to get through school and to not commit violence. And it just seemed really unfair that there were so many kids without mentors. There's people signed up to be mentors. It takes funding to make all those matches between a big, who's a mentor, and a little, who's a mentee. So I wanted to donate to try to help that happen. I want to see the world be a better place, and hopefully these stories help. And also hopefully any of the proceeds from the book will go to help more kids get matched with a caring adult.
Well, that was just such a giving act and a selfless act. We're living in times where people blurt it out, monetize this, make money on this. It's all about money, 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 money. And you have just completely flipped that on the head. And to see that all of your author royalties go to Big Brothers, Big Sisters is so uplifting and so incredible and heartwarming. This is such a feel-good book. I call it a hug and a mug, so feel-good. And if you just need that lift, these stories are so incredible. The ripple of effect. I know that everyone who grabs a copy is going to be so touched by it. You have been through a pretty hectic time, a very stressful time. Whilst you've come out the other end and me is much better and well, there was a lot of stress going on there. You've now written your book. You are still very busy and active in the community and all of the work you do with HumanKind. How do you actually take care of yourself? Because to give, and to be a dad and to do everything you do, to be the husband, the best person you can be. How do you take care of your own self, and what are some of your self-care rituals?
It took a while to realize that I needed self-care. I think it's important for everyone to just realize what brings you that peace and calmness, because it's different for all of us. So for me, being out in the woods is really peaceful. My son also likes that. So we'll go out camping. And to me, that's self-care. I also find helping other people is part of my self-care routine as well. When I'm helping other people, I can't think about myself. I can't think about issues going on. But when I'm helping them, I'm in that moment. I have a purpose. I feel great about it. I also try to meditate every morning, maximum of 10 minutes. I'm not great at it, but at the start of the meditation, I always think about one thing I want to get better at. For example, there was a time where I was really stressed and every little thing would kind of stress me out. And I'd say, okay, before I get stressed out, I'm going to take a deep breath and think, is this really important? And after saying that to myself enough mornings, I found that I started automatically doing it. So kind of coming up with that thing that would help and making that the start of my meditation every morning has been extremely helpful. And I also find writing thank you notes, because when I write a thank you note, I'm reliving that kindness someone did for me, and it kind of helps center me as well. Those are some of the ways that I try to do self-care. And I also love softball. Like, that's just really fun. And when I can play softball, I can't think about anything else, or I might get hit in the head with a ball. So I think for everyone, it's finding what puts you in that state of mind and scheduling the time, because you deserve it. You'll be a better dad, a better mom, a better person if you care for yourself. As hard as that is and as selfish as it might seem, it's not.
Love your words of wisdom there, and I love your self-care rituals, because everyone, especially in these stressful times, we need to make that time so we don't burn out. And so we can actually help others. And I love how helping others is part of your self-care ritual, because I like to do one small act of kindness. That to me might just be saying good morning to an absolute stranger and smiling, or asking the person who's serving me, how are you today? Just all of those little small things. Now, Brad, how can we stay in touch with you after the show?
Feel free to send me an email. You can send it to my Gmail, bradaronson@gmail.com. You can follow me on Facebook or Instagram. I love hearing from people who are out there doing kindness in the world, or want to send a message. So please feel free to email me or message me through social media.
And I see that you're going to be actually getting submissions for your site where people can write about their kindness and what they've done based on what's inspired them from the book, and send it through to your website.
Yeah, so people who are inspired can send me stories, and then I plan to put those on the site. It's fun, and a lot of the stories are through that submission.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, I could talk to you literally forever about your book and all of the incredible people you've interviewed and met along your journey. I'm so happy that your wife, Mia, got through that, as well as you, through that stressful time. And one thing that really stood out was that Jack was really able to be this happy kid, happy-go-lucky kid throughout the process. And that was by the thanks of people coming to you to offer help to you, and actually just doing it, or saying, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. So such a reminder to really look for those opportunities, as you've mentioned, in your own community, within your own family and friends and circle. What would be your hope now for your book readers, or those who tune in listening to your book via Audible?
That when people hear these stories or read these stories, they realize that each of us has such enormous potential to change lives. And we don't have to figure out how to help everyone, but if we help one person, that's enough. We're helping that person. And in a lot of cases, it has this ripple effect. We don't even realize it helps thousands of people. I mean, in my book, there's stories where a single conversation, a single letter has this ripple effect. And that is just beautiful and empowering. So I hope that people are inspired to go out and make their own differences.
I love that. Well, thanks again, Brad Aronson, for being on the podcast show. It's an absolute pleasure and honor. When I stumbled across your book, I was like, wow. And it's just been so powerful, uplifting. It's changed my life and my perspective, learning from your own journey and many others that you feature in the book. So thank you for all of the work you do to help bring this human kindness really to the forefront. It's just incredible. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me on your show. And thanks for all you do to help your listeners. They appreciate it and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Brad. That really means the world to me, because I tell you what, doing acts of kindness really fills your cup up. People are like, why are you so happy? Why are you full of energy? And I'm like, it's just the acts of kindness and the fulfillment of helping others. If you're feeling down, I always say, go out and help someone else. It'll really change your world around. It'll really just take the focus off you and just has such a profound effect. We'll say goodbye to Brad Aronson. Thank you to our incredible listeners globally. I really appreciate you. As Brad's mentioned, you matter, but I truly hope it empowers you and inspires you to be kind to yourself and others as well. So be sure to subscribe, to leave a 5-star rating and review, and to tell someone you love too. And together, let's feel good from within.